The story begins with a fire raging in a barren land. A man knelt on the burning ground, his body staggering, badly injured. A tall soldier stood proudly, his gaze sharp and determined. He wore a majestic military uniform and held a sword. His eyes were filled with pride and victory. In another corner, someone who looked full of rage shouted, his eyes burning red, "You really are a demon." The yell echoed through the air, full of hatred and despair. Meanwhile, the warrior smiled faintly, as if enjoying this moment. "Is that what you think of me?" His tone sounded dismissive. Then he raised his sword high to end it all. The man finally snapped. Suddenly, a young man shouted loudly. He stared at the computer screen in disbelief as his favorite character died so easily. On the screen, a young man wearing glasses was watching a game trailer. Hayden Reich, the hero of the game, was known as a genius in exterminating monsters. He is the main protagonist. However, the young man with glasses still found it hard to accept the fact that the protagonist was so weak. He was easily killed by Julian, the villain. Annoyance began to creep over the young man when he saw Julian's annoying figure on the screen. Suddenly, an email from Fromwell Software Company came in offering a chance to pre-order. Statistics showed that he had been playing games for 5 years and spent a lot of money on his hobby. However, when reading the conversations of other players, he was surprised everyone actually liked Julian's figure. Seeing that, he started typing. His hand moved quickly, wanting to cancel her pre-order of the game. Without hesitation, he pressed the cancel button. Once the process was complete, he felt relieved. The game that she had previously considered the best now felt like trash to him. He lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking if only he had been a hero in that game, he would have been a true protagonist. To get back in the mood, he picked up a flower pot and doused it with water, hoping that it would thrive and grow well. He looked back as he saw the notification come in, a message from the game developer confirming that his pre-order had been canceled. He paused, unsure whether to reply to the message. Briefly, her mind wandered, what if the developer refunded all the money he had spent over the past 5 years? After that, the game developer provided a website. After he clicked on the link, the computer screen suddenly glowed brightly. A strong wind picked up, so strong that his glasses fell off. His head was pulled into the screen, as if an invisible force was trying to drag him in. Frantically, he tried to hold himself up. His right hand gripped the edge of the desk, while his left tried to turn off the computer. However, his efforts were in vain. He continued to be absorbed into the screen. He screamed so loudly, his voice echoed outside. Then, in an instant, the computer screen turned itself off. He began to enter the gate to the other world. As soon as he arrived, his body slammed into the rocky ground. Wincing in pain, he raised his head and asked, "Where am I now?" The scenery around him felt familiar, the rocky hills he had seen before. However, before he could think further, a giant scorpion appeared in front of him. It raised its claws, preparing to attack. Above it, a name appeared, Scorpion Demon. As he prepared to fight, a notification suddenly appeared before his eyes. His eyes widened, the display looked exactly like in the game. He ran in fear, trying to stay out of the Scorpion Demon's attack range. However, with surprising speed, the monster's claws lashed out at him in panic. He raised one hand to parry, and what happened took him by surprise. 0 damage. His eyes widened. "What? I'm not hurt." Unable to think any longer, the second attack came. He immediately ducked, avoiding the claws that almost hit him. In reflex, he threw his fist towards the monster's beard. The fist struck hard. The Scorpion Demon staggered backwards, its body trembling with fear. He was speechless, not yet realizing how great his power was. As it continued to run, a memory suddenly popped into its head. Something important, something that could change everything. Something crossed his mind about changing the game's storyline. He kept running, dodging the increasingly angry Scorpion Demon. The monster jumped high, its claws raised, ready to pounce. Right at that moment, another memory popped into his mind. "I know how to fight this." Reflexively, he drew his sword from the side. His feet planted on the ground, his body prepared in an attack position. "I can do it, like a hero." A bright light enveloped her sword, dazzling the sight. Without hesitation, he swung it forward as a glowing slash shot out at high speed, straight towards the scorpion demon. The scorpion demon was instantly split into two. The effect of the slash was so powerful that the ground beneath it split as well, creating a large, elongated crack. He was rooted to the spot, still unable to believe the power he had just used. Am I this strong? However, one thing was now clear to him: he was going to change the storyline of this game. With her own two hands, she would kill Julian, the villain. Suddenly, a notification appeared in front of him. Swordsmanship Foundation unlocked. Skill acquired. Crescent slash. He was confused. Crescent slash? But this wasn't Hayden's skill. A strange premonition appeared in his mind. Slowly, he began to remove his headgear. His eyes then fell on the sword he was holding. Its shape was familiar, but it definitely didn't belong to Hayden. His eyes bulged. The character he was using was silver-haired with a long sword. From behind the shadows, her figure finally came into clear view. Silver hair glistening under the light, a pair of narrow eyes staring intently. In front of him, several skill notifications kept popping up, filling his view screen. However, what was most surprising was the character name that appeared on his status. Character name, Julian Criffar Plassen. His eyes widened. What? Instantly, his anger boiled over. Nitrogen monoxide way. Why did I become Julian? After that, all the static about Julian appeared. Inside a magnificent yet cold castle, a man stood silently in front of a large mirror. His gaze is blank, as if trying to understand his reflection there. He opened his eyes, trying to recognize the strange figure that was now him, Julian. "Is this real?" he murmured softly, half whispering to the reflection. He tried to scream, calling out to the system, begging to be returned to his homeworld. But there was no response. Only the echo of his own voice returned, accompanied by a heavy sigh that hung in the air. Suddenly, a notification appeared on the invisible screen. Julian speaks formally. He still has a lot to learn about the character of Julian, the person he is now portraying, or perhaps already fully himself. Quick steps sounded from outside. The door to the room opened slowly, creating a small creak that disturbed the silence. A man enters, his face pale, filled with a fear that cannot be hidden. The shadow of Julian's cruelty was clear in his eyes. Julian glanced sharply, full of a piercing cold aura. That gaze seemed to be able to kill with just a look. The man trembled instantly. Julian knew he was from the Criffart family. To cover his fear, he tried to hide his nervousness behind a faint smile, then asked, "How are you, Mr. Julian?" Julian didn't answer immediately, but in the back of his mind, something was niggling. There was something strange about this man, the way he looked, and especially his smile. Silently, Julian tried to find an opening. What was he hiding? What was really going on? Meanwhile, the man asked something. "There are rumors, sir," he said slowly. Julian was surprised, because in his memory the rumor in question was lost. At the same time, the man continued to observe. His eyes were sharp, probing. Julian tried to put together a casual expression, but his mind was busy making excuses. Finally, in a cold but calm voice, Julian said, "Heron, do you believe the rumors?" Instantly, the man's face Heron changed. Shocked, his gaze froze, and beads of sweat began to appear on his forehead. Julian's eyes lit up with a sharp gaze, and his smile slowly formed. Heron was terrified to see Julian smile. Then he tried to change the subject and was more careful in speaking. The reason he was here. He got a message from the Elders Association. Elders Associatio, that must be referring to the Elders Association that the nobles created. They've always regarded bloodline as important. Those direct bloodline oldies wouldn't just stand still if a collateral family member tried to grab power. Julian is a collateral family member, but he considers himself the royal family's dog. Because of this outstanding swordsmanship and magic ability, he is considered a thorn to this organization, to the point that they want to get rid of him immediately. And the intended message content is participate in the Shut Eyes entrance test as an instructor. Shut Eyes, They secretly carry out missions from the palace and normally act as the royal guard. They're an exclusive royal organization where people with incredible martial force gather. After which the protagonist learns that the character of Julian is a strong and influential figure. On the other hand, Heron smiled sarcastically. The look in his eyes was deceitful. It wasn't just a casual invitation. He knew that behind Heron's words lay a potentially disastrous trap. However, before the atmosphere became more tense, Julian calmly said, "Okay, I agreed to be the supervisor." Heron was shocked. His eyes widened, his mouth opened slightly, unable to believe what he had just heard, because as far as he knew, Julian was still sick. But before he could say anything, Julian raised his hand and began to unwrap the bandage wrapped around his head. The wound that should still be there has fully recovered. Heron froze, fear beginning to creep up on him again. How could such a wound heal so quickly? He turned around, as if to end the conversation. But just as Heron was about to step outside, Julian's cold, authoritative voice called out to him. "Heron," he said softly. However, the tone was enough to make the man's body stiffen in place. Heron turned around hesitantly. Sweat began to bead on his temples, and his heartbeat quickened. In front of him, a potted plant suddenly appeared. Julian held out the pot with a thin, ominous smile, the look in his eyes holding 1,000 threats. Heron was speechless, trembling. He took the potted plant and quickly left the room. But as the door closed behind him, his legs went limp. He stood rooted outside, his body trembling violently. The air around her felt heavy, like Julian's murderous air was still clinging to her neck, like an invisible sword ready to slash at any moment. Meanwhile, inside the room, Julian stood in silence. His mind kept returning to one name, Field of Orchids. He grabbed his sword that was leaning against the wall, then stood up and opened the wardrobe. Inside hung various styles of clothing, all perfectly organized. After a moment's consideration, he picked out a simple white shirt. Today, he was going to an academy to attend an interview. With Heron, he would step into a new chapter. However, Julian knew that in such a big place, intrigue and danger were always lurking. That morning, Julian and Heron left Reveal Academy by horse-drawn carriage. Julian occasionally glanced out the window, his mind full of images of the academy that was their destination. A few hours later, the carriage arrived at Veal Academy. Julian got off the train and was stunned. "This is much bigger than I imagined," Julian murmured, stunned. Then he told Heron to leave. But Heron refused and wanted to see Julian's test. Julian was startled, his gaze fixed on Heron, who was now radiating a threatening aura. A notification window suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. Rank, unique, specifications, ability to judge emotions based on color. Without hesitation, Julian chose the option that appeared to test Heron. As a character, Julian is known to have a sharp sensitivity to emotions, something that has always been his strength in reading situations. He also used anger so that the opponent would lose sense of reason and make more mistakes in a fight. That's the skill of the character Julian, according to the protagonist. For the Elder Association, Julian was a thorn in the flesh who was too powerful and influential. Julian's great and famous character made him the target of many who wanted to get rid of him. As Julian walked in the academy courtyard, suddenly someone bumped into him from behind. "Sorry," the young man said nervously. However, once he saw Julian's face, his eyes widened. His face was pale, and he fell to the ground, trembling with fear. The other 3 students who witnessed the incident were also transfixed, holding their breath as Julian's cold gaze swept over them. All attention was now focused on Julian and the fallen youth. Heron immediately stepped closer, whispering a quiet warning, "Julian, don't do anything." However, the true protagonist, who was now in Julian's body, did not like the character he was playing, because with just the power of judging emotions, everyone is instantly afraid of Julian just by looking at him. The protagonist is still looking for ways to control the atmosphere. Suddenly, a woman stepped up and greeted Julian. "Julian," she said with a gentle yet authoritative smile. The protagonist recognized the figure. This woman was Eileen, one of the main characters in Kill the Demon King starting now. instructor of the Veil Academy associated with the Mage Tower of the Adrathan Empire. She is a genius mage who can handle the metal element of all 5 elements. In her young age, she already held the title of 5th tier at the age of 24. And also she gave a lot of advice to Reich in the Academy arc. The protagonist was confused as to why Eileen was addressing him, but he immediately sensed a strong aura of hatred emanating from the woman. With his ability to read emotions, he believes Eileen has a grudge against Julian. However, what was the reason? The protagonist didn't know. He casually took advantage of the situation. A mocking comment flew out of his mouth, enough to make Eileen fall silent. She just looked at him, not responding. Seeing her reaction, the protagonist chuckled, playing up the atmosphere. Suddenly, Julian drew his sword. Everyone watching was shocked, some recoiled in fear. He brought his face closer to Eileen, putting the sword between them. And Julian's gaze made things even scarier. Thanks for watching. See you in the next chapter. If you enjoyed, don't forget to comment and like.